Hey, welcome to part three of Little Book Stories. This is a limited series of 10 episodes where there's this stream of consciousness, unedited flow of stories, ideas, insights that correlate with the 10 chapters I wrote in my little book of Big Reasons to Love America. And the idea is that you would perhaps get this other dimension from reading the book, or perhaps you stumble upon this episode and then you go, I think I want to read this book. So hopefully this is what's going to happen. Today, chapter 3 is dedicated to creativity. Here we go. Do you want to build a truly extraordinary life, what we call an exponential life? My weekly newsletter brings you insights, stories, expert conversations, my favorite books and podcasts every Sunday. Subscribers get exclusive access to my monthly group coaching webinars, all for free. And for the cost of a latte a month, you can help support our work and access our full archives. Subscribe at christianrayflores.com. So creativity is a thing that only flourishes, I think, in an environment of freedom, of being able to make choices, in an environment of acceptance. And that's why sort of the first two chapters build into the third chapter. The first chapter is about acceptance, is about having this country of immigrants where everybody's from somewhere else and people accept each other, they clash with each other, they learn from each other. And these sort of cultures and subcultures get created and created and created. And it's this perpetual motion. And that there's also freedom to do that, right? So there's this incredible space for being able to make choices and change direction. Creativity comes from that. I think it flourishes in that. And of course, there are absolutely amazing inventors, scientists, researchers, artists who have done timeless pieces of work of art in places that are not free. But I would say that they do it in spite of the lack of freedom, not because of the lack of freedom. And America is a particularly fertile place for creativity. So I'll explain some of the insights there and some of the stories. So, growing up in places like Chile and Mozambique and the Soviet Union, I was always this musical kid. And I had a natural voice. I loved music and I had a natural voice. So early on, when I was like 5, 6 years old, I would sing around the house, and then my parents would have visitors at home and they would say, Christian, come here, sing a song, and I think they would put me on a stool or something like that. And I would just sing something and people would sort of give me praises and stuff like that. So it's sort of this early glimpses of singing. And then when we ended up after 4 countries in Mozambique, I joined this little Chilean choir. And these were all kids of immigrants, kids of exiles, who were directed by one of the ladies who was an exile as well. And her name is Tia Keka, we called her. Angelica was her name, but we called her Tia Keka. And Tia Keka was awesome, okay? And she would teach us all these songs that are, Brazilian, Argentine, Chilean, Colombian, South American folklore, basically. And they would have like drums and guitars and little, shakers and stuff like that. And we would create these concerts, right, together. And that was probably the first time where I just fell in love. It was something, something clicks in you and you go, this is like I feel at home doing this. And this lasted for a few years. We even performed in front of the first president of Mozambique. His name was Samora Machel. And you can see, if you go to the book, you can see a picture of me and him. We sang for him and he was asking us our names, and he was such a legendary figure. He was this Fidel Castro type guy, like he wore the Fidel Castro fatigues and he was fighting for independence in the bush. And then when Mozambique got its independence from the Portuguese, they came to power, and this guy was still sort of in this Marxist Fidel Castro vibe and very revered. Eventually he got killed in a plane crash over South Africa. And there's a lot of claims. It's never been proven that it was actually shut down. It was a very adversarial regime at the time to Mozambique. But at the time, he was sort of fresh into the scene, and we were singing, and he was there, and it was really cool. So when we moved back to the Soviet Union, I went into breakdancing, and I discovered, again, these pirated tapes of films that were like bad copies. And I saw people breakdancing, and I was like, what is this? I want to do this. and I was like obsessive over this thing. And I was already, it was before college, and then going into college, I was still doing it. And there was this underground scene of breakdancers in the Soviet Union that it was like quite literally underground. It was, I think there were like in Moscow 2 places where people like that, weirdos, congregated. And the crew that I was part of, it was like underground, like literally there's like a dance, like some mirrors and a place where you can dance and train and learn from each other. And then the weekends we would go and do battles, in like promenade places, bring a boombox, like the classic hip hop thing, right? And then there was this one club, and it was a club, meaning it was called a nightclub, but it actually closed its doors at midnight. So it was not really a club, but people danced there. And there was this one club in Moscow. There's like maybe 5 for the whole city. It's like really Soviet, right, stuff. And where they allowed breakdancing. So I would go there and we would do battles and so I sort of joined this underground crew. There were maybe 150, maybe 200 of us in the whole country, something like that. It was very sub culture. And I became real good at it because I loved it, right? And eventually I was sort of going, I was getting an education as an economist, right? I was going after a degree in economics, a master's degree. So I had this sort of ability to learn and think in business terms as well. So I would find books about show business. And it was about biographies of great musicians or sort of the journey of a recording artist and all the nuances. And I really obsessed over these things. And I sort of projected, okay, this is how show business should work. And it was all from America, right? And I was still in the Soviet Union, but from a distance, I was shaping a view of how music is created, the studio, the process of recording it, how labels work, the deals that they were making, that you can have a producer and you can have session musicians, all these nuances I was learning literally from little tapes or videos or books or biographies, and I would just devour those things. And I sort of shaped a view of even the type of work ethic you need to have if you want to be a professional artist. So eventually, like I think it was year 2 of university, I was going, maybe I could do this professionally. And it was such an impossibility, honestly. But I started, but I wasn't even pursuing it. I was just trying to get serious about it, right? Because I was still, working on a master's degree in economics. And but I started choreographing, and I was I joined like a jazz studio, so I would learn vocals, and I became educated in jazz, and I just discovered Al Jerreau and Ray Charles and George Duke and Shaka Khan and just these incredible artists that I would probably, this is still the 80s, right? This is still Soviet Union. I would probably never see live ever. I discovered the aesthetic, the kind of music that I liked. I sort of gravitated towards jazz, R&B, pop, and hip hop. Those are the main sort of things that I was playing with, and I loved it. And I just loved rap music, especially the early stuff that was emerging. And the cool thing, here's the cool thing, is that, eventually I got to meet Al Jerreau. I got to actually hang out with Shaka Khan, and we actually shared the stage. She went on and I went on, and she invited me to her table, and we had champagne together. And I eventually, when we moved to the States many years later, I started a production company in LA, and it was basically working with Hollywood producers. And one of the people I ended up collaborating with is George Duke, like the guy who produced Michael Jackson, the guy who was a genius songwriter and performer in his own right, and he worked with some of the greats. And I remember just it being so surreal to be in his studio in the Hollywood Hills, and I was working with an Eastern European artist, and I was doing the music video, which is like big budget video with my company, and he was doing the album, so we sort of collaborated here. And I remember asking him, I said, what is the defining characteristic of a creative person who succeeds? And he said, and I was thinking he was going to say, work ethic or creativity or whatever, right? And he said they could see themselves succeeding. That was sort of his crystallized wisdom to me. And it stuck with me forever, still sticks with me. Even in spaces like entrepreneurship, which I think entrepreneurs are essentially the artists of business. They create and imagine something before it even exists, and then they build that thing. And then they basically speak it, will it, build it into existence. And I think entrepreneurship is very, very much an art, right? It is, and including the risks involved, right? 9 out of 10 startups fail. I mean, it's very, very similar to how artists are. So like this is flash forward and then flash back. Let's go back to what I was sort of imagining, right? I graduated from university with a master's degree in economics. Literally, this country falls apart the year that I graduate. And all of a sudden, it becomes from this restrictive place to this free place. Like free, like completely free, right? And before that, to go into music, it was a top-down endeavor. So it has to be approved by the states. It's impossible to get on the main channels. Everything's controlled by the state. And then when freedom came, this complete free market shift, there were labels popping up everywhere. The decision makers on the TV channels, radio, became much more independent from sort of top-down control, and then new radio stations, newspapers, magazines were popping up that were private. So I was like, this is my chance, and all of my friends were going into banking and finance, and I was sort of bored with that, although I became forever in love with economics. So I'm still geek out on economics quite a bit, but I never practiced it as a professional, although most of my friends did. I had this dream. I could imagine myself succeeding, just like George Duke said. And at first it was really pathetic, right? Because I was an amateur, right? So I have some pieces, but not all of them. And eventually I started choreographing some pieces that were not breakdance, but they were more of a mix of a discipline thing, that how you put a show together. And I didn't have an in. I didn't have any money or connections. I didn't have an in. So basically, I made friends in some people and some artists that were up and coming artists. So I became part of their entourage, just to be in the orbit of people who are doing what I wanted to do someday. So I would get invited to these parties. In one of those parties, we're hanging out, and I dressed the part, right? Fake it till you make it. And somebody comes in. This short guy comes in, and he just pulls me aside and goes, "Hey, can I talk to you?" I'll go, "Yeah." Are you an artist? "Yeah, I own a studio." And at the time, recording studios there were 4 in the whole city, maybe 5, maybe 3, I don't remember, but it was impossible to get into a recording studio for somebody like me. And it was impossible to create demos or actually record at home. You can create demos, but you can't create an actual recording because the technology was not there at the time. So like having somebody like that say that to you, I was like, he had the golden ticket. So he said, "Okay, so if you look like an artist," and I looked exotic, I had long hair and stuff like that, and I was dressed the part. And he said, "If I give you some free hours in the middle of the night in my studio, what would you do with that?" And I said, "I would create some demos for you and see if you like them, if they're up to par." And he said, "Okay, well, call me." Gave me his number. And he asked me before we parted, he said, "Who's going to write the songs and who's going to write the lyrics?" I said, "I'll write both songs and lyrics." And he said, "All right, well, call me." And so I went home and started writing songs and lyrics, but I've never written anything in my life. I just said yes in the moment, and I had to figure it out. So I could see myself succeeding. I didn't have the skills yet. And I wrote some stuff, and I brought it to him, and he said, "Oh man, maybe that's good enough." And he gave me like a producer guy who could arrange stuff, and he was terrible, didn't get my vision at all, because I had this very specific R&B pop sound that nobody did in the country at the time. So I had to go find my own person, and I found this keyboard player who played on this night restaurant. And I said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. It's just nobody's doing this kind of music, but this is the kind of music I want to do." He's like, "All right, I'm all in." And he became basically my partner, my business partner, and my co-producer. And the guy who was playing bass in it's like a cover band he had. He became our manager, right? Like none of us had the qualifications or the expertise, but those are the 3 people, the 3 co-producers of my first project. And we rented a place together with him, the 2 of us, and we would just write songs, and they were terrible, and write little demos, and they were terrible, and then became better and better. And eventually it became to a degree that I go, "Oh, we have a sound. We have a distinct sound. It's very specific. It's very Western." Again, the influence of American culture was there from the beginning. And it was R&B pop with some hip hop and some rap in it. No one knew how to do that kind of thing. It was very eclectic. And we this is it. This is the thing. So we finalized all of our money that we had. We put into studio time. We were already not able to record in the original studio, but I'd give us a little bit of a bump. And then I recruited some dancers and a rapper, and I had to teach them how to dance together, because they were all break dancers. The street dancers don't sync very well. And the choreography was not just hip-hop. It was almost like an eclectic thing that I created. So I had to train my dancers, and then I had to coach them and rehearse with them. And we rehearsed like 5 songs. I think it took us 6 months to put together a set, essentially, of 5 songs that is tight. And I was just, that work ethic, that focus, and that level of excellence All of those things were deduced by me from the videos that I saw and the books that I read about American show business. And we auditioned at this club. There were only 2 or 3 in the whole city, which was the Hot Club. And they hired us on the spot, and then they hired us in the next one, the next one, the next one. Next thing we know, we have 2 or 3 contracts offered to us. By the end of the year, we were on national television. And then I wake up January 1st because they put me in this one show. Imagine if New Year's and Christmas was one event, because that's what it was in Russia at the time. New Year's is the Christmas and New Year's. And then the tradition, not only for Russia, but all of the former Soviet Union countries, like 15 countries, was on that day, the whole family gets together and they drink vodka and they eat and they hang out and they watch one show. 15 countries watch one show, whatever, 250 million people, I think, or something like that. And that was the show I was in. So I wake up January 1st and everybody recognizes my face. So it's like an actually literal overnight success. Of course, it's not overnight. It's a lot of work before that, but the leap to the success was overnight. And then eventually that built a whole career where we went from playing small venues just in the capital city or bigger cities, St. Petersburg, to bigger venues, to basically touring all 15 countries and playing sports arenas, entertaining millions on TV, radio, magazine covers, newspaper articles all over the place, like stadiums, sports arenas, big clubs, all kinds of venues. And, it was just an incredible ride. And President Boris Yeltsin was in '96 getting reelected, and the communists were losing in the poll. They were winning in the polls. He was losing in the polls. And by that time, I was intensely anti-communist, and I had the platform, right? I had the influence. So his people connected to my people. I had a #1 hit called "Our Generation," and "Our Generation" was an anthem of freedom. Basically, that's what it was. It became massively popular all over because it really reflected the pulse of this newfound freedom. And the chorus literally said, "Our generation, we are a sign of liberation." And of course, it was very naive. It was a fantastic track. Everybody loved it because we were more of a glitch in the system, not really a sign of liberation, as it turns out later. But at the time, we didn't know that. And Boris Yeltsin was the guy who was fighting for democracy. And so his people came and they asked us to campaign for him. They used that song as an anthem in many of the ads and shows. And we went on TV on tours, and we just pushed for it. And we helped him get elected. I was not the only one doing it. It was a bunch of us, right, artists, who of course were really interested in freedom and not a return to communism. But we made a small contribution in a very historic event. And if Boris Yeltsin had lost, the communists were coming back, restoring the old order, basically losing our career. Was the best case scenario. It would have been actually pretty bad. But at the time we didn't think of it. We were just all in, right? The reason I tell you the story is that a lot of that success, that massive success of creativity, was gleaned from American sources, the American spirit, American show business, the professionalism, the excellence, the creativity, all of those things. And some of the people that I dreamt that inspired me at the time, I got to share the stage with or meet in person or even become friends with. And it was just absolutely surreal. I started working with orphans in Moscow, and we did this big events with an organization called Hope Worldwide. And it's like 3,000-4,000 orphans, big events. And we had a sports festival and then a gala concert at the end. And I sort of organized it. I brought a lot of my celebrity friends, etc. In one of those events, Michael Jackson, who was sort of one of the key inspirations behind my musical sort of vision, he actually attended. He was doing a show in Moscow at the time, and he walked in the door, and it was just completely surreal, okay, to be in his presence. And I was actually about to go on stage, and it dawned on me, I was completely paralyzed, totally lost it, right? And it dawned on me that I'm actually about to go on stage and sing, and he's still in the room. And I was like, yeah, this is not happening. I can't. And he left, like, I think it was 15 minutes or so before I hit the stage. And I was so happy because I thought I couldn't bring myself to do it in front of somebody who was such a huge influence for me. But what happened after that was even more remarkable because we had a bunch of volunteers. My mom was one of them. And so they loved our volunteers so much when they saw it. They were so impressed because it was a large scale operation. The kids were just over the moon that they said, hey, we need some people for a big number during the stadium, like 80,000 people in a stadium. And he does this song called Earth Song. And he had a lot of extras. You need extras. And they needed some older women. So my mom made it as an extra. So she was literally on stage with Michael Jackson in front of 80,000 people as a volunteer, as an extra. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, who never in my wildest dreams would have imagined that, but it happened, right? So it's pretty cool. And the reason I tell you these stories is because creativity was really gleamed from American culture. As a matter of fact, this is relatively recent, maybe a year ago. One of the guys who was, for a long period of time, the director of MTV Russia, on Instagram, he shared a clip of one of my videos, and he said, "Trust me on this, show business in Russia started with Christian Ray," and I was like, completely unsolicited. I was like, oh my gosh, this is such an honor. And I don't think it's actually true per se from my perspective, but if the director of MTV says that, it means that there's something that I brought into the industry that was new, right? And all of that was inspired by the American way of doing music, of doing show business. And what I'm really grateful for is that eventually when we moved to the States, I was able to collaborate with some of the incredible creators, like George Duke was one of them. I was already living in Los Angeles with a production company. We did music and music videos for Eastern European artists with like top level Hollywood producers. So all of a sudden I find myself in this just surreal spot again, where I was able to, work with George Duke, and like I would hire directors and producers that have produced some of the most iconic music videos. I remember being an inspiration to me in so many ways, and I would be able to hire them to work for me, like directors of photography or directors, etc., or producers. I produced a rock band that wanted to produce in LA, and we produced it in the studio of Kiss, and the whole record was produced by Kurt Como, who is a producer of Kiss. He produced Psycho Circus for Kiss, and we even hired one of the former Kiss members rather, to do a guitar solo for us. Which is, the whole thing was like a scene from Forrest Gump, right? And the reason I tell you all of this again is to share some of the stories that maybe didn't make it into the book, but also to give you a sense of just the power that America has, that the culture of freedom, innovation, acceptance of the other, this culture that allows for a lot of remixing of ideas, of creating new things out of nothing, that it first of all nurtures the creative people that are here, that are born here, but it also attracts people from all over the world that come in and they want to be part of this magic that happens here in movies and film, video and TV and all kinds of other things. And now you can have incredible collaborations at a distance because of the internet and broadband and the whole thing. But I think America still has this almost like gravitational pull, this environment where people just feel that they can create new things. And this is not just, it's not limited to music. It's technology, right? It's science, research. We import the brightest minds. The most creative people are attracted to be here. And then they create new things, and then those brightest minds and their work and the labor of their creative minds are now exported into the world, and it attracts more people. And it's this cycle of it's like a vortex of creativity that happens in America. And I think that's extraordinary. And it doesn't really work well without freedom, without liberty, without choice, without respect for unusual, unorthodox approaches to new things. And I hope we keep it as a country. There's plenty of countries. Obviously, we're very blessed in America because we have a lot of land, a lot of resources, oil, food, all those things. We're very fortunate resource-wise. But there are plenty of countries with lots of resource that don't have the level of prosperity and creativity that we have. And so there's a secret sauce, and the secret sauce is people. The human part is the differentiator. We attract the best people, we nurture the best people. People have the ability to pursue their dreams, to pursue their passions, to develop their talents, to experiment, to fail, to experiment and succeed, all of that. So, as an American, I'm grateful to be here. It is an incredible honor. And if you're an American, and if you're maybe just watching it from another country, you can intuit that spirit, even if you don't live here, which is what I did, right? You can study the standards, the artistry, the hard work, the freedom of thought. All of those things you can study even from a distance and absorb it and then implement it where you are, which is exactly what I did, And that was the secret sauce of my success, even overseas. But even more than that, living here, and I work with startup founders as a performance coach a lot. I have this front row seat at the most innovative, brilliant, bold, bright minds, and I get to help them in one way or another, either through my marketing company, we do brand strategy, or through my performance coaching business, where I just help them think a certain way and sort of create a lifestyle and the habits for high performance. And I get this front row seat at just how extraordinary this space is for people to build things, and it could be creative things or business things or other things, and it's absolutely off the charts, the best place on earth for that. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you even drew some conclusions about yourself, your own life, how you can be nurturing creativity in yourself in any area of life. And also that you can appreciate, delight in, even perhaps nurture and help us maintain this country as the country for creativity and innovation.